Hi there. My name's John Sumser, and I'm here today to talk to you about intelligent tools and where we are right now. It's been a disturbing time, and you might guess that things have ground to a halt in the world of AI and data and people analytics, and you couldn't be further than the truth. So I'm here to tell you about that. When I use the term intelligent tools, I'm referring to all of the things that people have called AI and predictive analytics and machine learning and natural language processing. I don't really think there's much intelligence involved just yet, and we'll see some of that over the course of this presentation. So when I say intelligent tools, I'm referring to that basket of stuff that is machine intelligence being applied to the work of HR. Again, intelligent tools are everything that has gone under the rubric of artificial intelligence, machine language, machine learning, natural language processing, deep learning, predictive analytics. So I run a company called HRExaminer.com. It's a publishing house that does industry analysis as its fundamental business. There's a website. There's a weekly newsletter. We have about 40,000 subscribers, most of them in senior management around the world. And we look at the edges of HR rather than current conventional practice. There are other people who do a great job of looking at what the benchmarks are today. Our job at the HR Examiner is to look over the edge and to see what's next. So weekly newsletters. We do an annual report about the state of intelligent tools. This year will be our fourth year of doing that annual report. And we have podcasts on Thursdays and Fridays. The Thursday show is a wrap up of the week's news in HR technology. The Friday show is interviews with key executives. We're in an incredibly uncertain time, and in times of uncertainty, there's only one real way to get ahead, which is to embrace the fact that you don't have the answers. For my money, I get very, very worried when I run into people who have answers right now because we don't know really what we're dealing with. And so I say, embrace the uncertainty, figure out what the very next thing to do is, and do it, and then repeat that process. And then, as you'll see in the presentation, I also think you need to look out a little bit beyond the next thing to do, but don't expect to have a big picture or a grand idea of how things are going to be before you get started. Things are going to be very ambiguous and very uncertain for a very long time. Whenever I do a presentation, I like to set the expectations early on. Here are the things you're going to take away from this talk. One, machines now have opinions. It used to be the case that the data that you put in was the data that you got out, but today machines take that data and they convert them into ideas about what's going to happen next, what should happen. And so the proper way to treat this output of the machines is not that it's factual data, but that it's one opinion that fits into your overall decision making. People are using this crisis that we're in, to increase the quality of their work by incorporating intelligent tools. I'll give you a number of examples and some companies to pay attention to. One thing is very clear. Our organizations are going to have to be very fluid and very resilient for the foreseeable future. The foundation is not being great at firefighting. If you want to put your company out of business, let everybody go fight fires as they come up and don't pay attention to where you're going. The foundation has to be great data, and now is the time to get your data in order. This is the time to really dig in and solve the data problems in your shop. For me, ethics is the art of continuously asking why and what will happen. If ethics is concerned with the best outcomes for people, employees, and other stakeholders, the company itself, and the surrounding community. The crisis gets us in the practice of slowing down our decisions until we've really tried to ferret out all of the unintended consequences. And then finally, I hope you'll take away a better understanding of how to make decisions that don't backfire on you as you move down the road. One of my favorite ways of thinking about leadership has always been that it is like being at the head of a line of cars driving across a bridge on a very foggy night. You can't see the sides of the bridge, you can't see the end of the bridge. You can see a little bit past your headlights in front of you. It looks like the picture on the top left. It's very challenging to drive in the fog, and that's often what leadership is like. Today, that problem of driving in the fog flows all the way down the organization. And so as managers in organizations following an inspired executive, we're used to having taillights to follow. And there are not so many taillights to follow now. We're all driving in the fog. And great leadership is understanding that we're driving in the fog, driving at an appropriate speed because we're driving in the fog, and trying to see a little bit further out in front of where your headlights will take you so that you can make sure that the next step gets you lined up for the right outcomes down the road. Get used to having no big picture for a while. It's not coming back anytime soon. As I mentioned, I'd rather not call these emerging tools that are starting to be everywhere artificial intelligence. They're mostly extraordinary and useful applications of math to big piles of data. It's useful, but it's not very intelligent. In a couple of minutes, I'll talk to you about what's happened to our big piles of data and why thinking of this as an intelligent process is kind of dangerous. Nonetheless, these tools are being baked into human capital management systems everywhere you look. Workday, for example, has 25 discrete machine learning functions in its talent management system alone. Ultimate Software deployed its entire workflow around intelligent tools and coaching. What they did at Ultimate Software is like they were going to put a new foundation under the house. So they lifted the whole house up and they installed intelligent tools as the foundation of their overall software package. It's an amazing job. Machine learning is a technique for examining data to discover repeated patterns. It's really great at chess. It's really great at the game of Go. It's not so good in driverless cars in cities. I'm sure you've heard some of those stories where a driverless car that does just fine out on the highway goes into the city, and there are 1,000 things that you can't predict every moment when you're in the city. You can't predict the ball that comes bouncing out of nowhere, or the cat that runs across the street, or the way that people are double parked in the middle of a skinny little alley. And so machine learning is not solving the problem for car manufacturers in the way that they thought, and our estimates of when we're going to see fully autonomous vehicles is moving further and further down the road. So it's a technique for discovering repeated patterns. It works in things with fixed rules in finite settings. It doesn't work so well in complicated places where you have emergent phenomena. And emergent phenomena are those things that happen every day in an organization where something that you completely didn't expect changes everything. Sound familiar? Natural language processing is a way of turning text into math equations and then doing mathy kinds of stuff with it. It's great for building search engines. It's great for seeing patterns across resumes. It's how you distill skills out of large quantities of resumes and job descriptions. Very, very useful. The whole idea is that if you find a repeated pattern, you can use that repeated pattern to make predictions. All of that is based on stable, repeated history. More about that in a moment. The most important thing you can take away from this talk is that machines can offer a remarkable opinion about what's going on, but it will always be just that, an opinion. It offers a point of view. I don't know if you've noticed, but where I live, everybody had left the office building and moved into their houses to do work. And when that happened, all sorts of historical predictability has vanished. Things that look like falling off a log to make quarterly numbers are not happening. People who used to work very carefully together are not able to do it. Here are some of the things that are broken. Our understanding of attrition no longer really works because there's this variable of people getting really sick and dying from something that wasn't part of our mapping of attrition in the past. Because of the various health concerns running around the system, our benefits demands are changing. The requirements for paid time off are different if you're working out of your house. Who makes a good part of a team and how many people you need and what backup looks like for a team to work and solve a specific problem, that's all changed. Contingency plans change because the contingencies are different. Even things as simple as bereavement leave no longer mean the same thing. Workflow timing is different when you have to schedule every interaction in a Zoom meeting. Assumptions about privacy change, communication flows change, message control changes, call center volume is up, particularly in HR. Job descriptions don't mean the same thing any longer. Management competencies are different when you manage a distributed organization. Operational analytics don't have any validity over time right now. The volume of job applications is skyrocketing. Hiring pace is slowing. The definition of who's essential and who's not essential is under fundamental examination. And what an engagement score means is up for grabs. And so these very essential components of the HR workload are all subject to question right now, and the historical data has really and completely changed. That means that many of the embedded machine learning tools that you find in your software already are going to produce more questionable results than they did in the past, and you're going to have to put more energy into arguing with the machine's conclusion. Nothing's predictable right now. Nothing's predictable right now except we're all going to get up tomorrow morning and the sun will come out. And it is a remarkable opportunity to build a clean slate in the world of your data and its structure in the HR department. It's a remarkable opportunity to embed the architecture necessary to build for the future a fully data-driven decision-making process. The first step is to get your data in order, and I'll talk about that in a second. You do this whole process one step at a time, but I want to underline something that I've been saying, which is that you can't let solving the crisis get in the way of coherent decision making for the long haul, even if you can't see where the long haul takes you. And you do that one step at a time. You get very wary of short-term fixes and band-aids. You design with ethics in mind, so now is a perfectly wonderful time to start thinking about the ethical consequences of your decisions, and you learn how to argue with machines. So let's look at a couple of those things. First of all, getting your data in order means having complete profiles for all employees. For the most part, HRIS systems have about 25% completion rates for the personnel profiles inside of their systems. But if you're going to have an agile, fluid, resilient organization that's able to shift based on the circumstances that come its way, you need to know as much as you can about everybody who works for you. So complete profiles for all employees is so important that you might consider withholding paychecks until people get their profiles filled out. And then you need to establish goals for prediction and tracking of work and workflow. There's going to be an extraordinary set of temptations to track everything because that's a way of coping with uncertainty. And it's more important to track a few things well than everything all at once. The other thing that's really worth understanding is that you should be building employee-like profiles for the people who are in your recruiting pipeline. We're in uncharted territory where there is reason to believe that 20% of your workforce is going to be out for 9 to 12 weeks with the disease and recovering. Another 3 to 5% of the workforce is going to die. People are going to need all sorts of extra bereavement leave because they are uh, taking care of loved ones who have recently passed. And so you're going to draw on your recruiting pipeline in ways that you haven't in the past as part of succession planning for frontline jobs. And then finally, you want to have a company data model so that you understand how all of the data goes together. And this is a non-trivial thing to do. Building a company data model takes a team and it takes some time. Now, we just talked about why there's a hiccup in the quality of the output of machines, and that's the way that it was up till the 1st of February is not the way that it is now. But even before then, there were problems with machine output, and they come from the timeliness of the data or latency, the sufficiency of the data, the completeness of the data. Sometimes machines are just plain wrong because they can't see certain things. They don't have a conscience. They don't have common sense. They don't have intuition. Old data and data quality get in their way all of the time, and you have to be wary of these things when the machine offers you a recommendation. How do you do this? How do you argue with the machine? Well, when you get a recommendation from a machine, regardless of the area of the recommendation, you want to sit back and look at it and you want to try to understand what's the data the machine used to make this conclusion, and would you draw the conclusion the same way? This business of arguing with the machine is going to get harder and more important as time goes on and we depend more and more on machines. So, what's working? What's working out there? I'll tell you, the volume of queries into the HR department is exploding through the ceiling. The volume of applications being sent because of the unemployment rates is exploding. Meanwhile, search is in terrible shape because it's HR and search has been in terrible shape. So the things that work reduce question volume and hurry up the response. They improve the quality of self-service results. They expand the effectiveness of search. They help deliver better quality experiences to applicants who are in your pipeline. They allow you to see further ahead, improve communications quality and consistency, repair and affirm employee trust, increase internal mobility effectiveness. And this is a key one. You're going to be moving people around the organization because of the impact of the disease on your staffing. And so you want to be able to understand who'd be good where and be able to move them quickly. And you need to be able to account for the fact that you could lose as many as 20% of the people at any given time. And then the last thing is tools work that reimagine succession as business continuity planning. So it's not just succession at the top of the organization, but it's succession in the places where you have individuals who are the only people who know how to do a specific function. The first area is there are a lot of really interesting things going on in conversation. Socrates, who are one of my favorite little companies, does systems integration with conversation. And so their idea is that any employee ought to be able to ask the machine a coherent question about something like, how many days off would I get to have my new baby? And currently, that takes an HR professional looking things up on 6 or 7 different systems to be able to formulate an answer. And you can answer questions that complex with Socrates. They currently help you get your policies in shape and get the automation in shape so that a machine can answer about 9,000 questions. Professional depth is another thing. If you're dealing in an environment with rigorous regulation that the HR folks are following, capacity helps build tools that dig deep into the regulations to find out answers. Candidate experience, companies like Textio or Phenom People offer really interesting ways to ensure the quality of the candidate experience over time, and they are typically moving into internal mobility as an extension of the candidate experience phenomena. Movela is an interesting company that does project performance, and that means they've got a project management framework, critical path thinking in large, complicated projects with hundreds of tasks. But performance management and task communication happens inside of that framework with a constant eye to the consequence of decisions on the final outcome. And then Textio does amazing stuff with communications effectiveness. Their tool takes the language that you put in your documents and analyzes it to see if it's going to have the intended impact on the audience. Search is a super bugaboo in human capital management systems. While everybody was getting Google in the consumer world, the HCM world has not been quite so fortunate with its search tools. So it's often the case that the data is in the system, but you can't find it. There are companies like HRExaminer and Socrates who are working on different aspects of search. HRExaminer solves the search problem in the overall talent acquisition function. So all of the databases under one roof with one search engine using HRExaminer. And then Socrates solves search on a policy and employee data perspective. And this is one of my favorite areas, sentiment and tension monitoring. You know, the engagement score is kind of broken right now. In America, 84% of employees are looking for new work. They're scared of having their job taken away from them. And so the idea that if you ask them a question about their engagement in the organization, they're going to give you a straightforward answer is a little fanciful. What you need to do with engagement scores is balance them with some sort of validation. And there are two basic approaches to doing that. One is sentiment analysis, which means taking free text responses to surveys and gelling a single thread of sentiment out of that stuff. And that's done very well by Ultimate Software. And then tension analysis, which is done by Keen Corp, is the idea that when something's up in a department or a division, the language in that department or division changes, and you can measure the change in the overall language in all of the communications by monitoring the communications and scoring it and catching it. This is great for spotting trouble spots. It's also great for finding spots where things that are really positive are happening. I call the next class people movers, and they are talent acquisition in orientation. Arena.io is an AI matching system. HRExaminer does scoring and matching of databases across the system. Phenom People has incredible personalization from the point of application through internal mobility. And WorkLogic does AI-driven RPO sorts of work, all worth paying attention to, all being used to great effect in the current environment. Ethics involves examining decisions and policies for their direct, indirect, and unintended consequences on employees, stakeholders, the entire ecosystem, and the organization as a whole. It's particularly important to think about ethics in a crisis time when people are making decisions in a real hurry. Ethics doesn't mean a set of rules. This is not don't do this and don't do that. This is more a slowing down of the decision-making process to make sure that we see where the likely fallout is going to be for a solution that we need to make to something right away. The basic areas of ethics are bias, privacy, total cost of ownership, and that might surprise you as an ethics problem, maintenance, reproducibility and liability. So let me walk through those really quickly. It's not possible to eliminate bias from decision making, and it probably isn't even very desirable. But it is really critical to be aware of bias in decision making. And so ethics highlights bias and allows you to see whether or not bias is leading you in the right direction. Privacy is both a legal and a trust question. Employees are in a new and precarious position, and the regulations that protect their privacy are under some pressure to make the workplace more accessible and more healthy. And so you're going to see a lot of trade-offs between safety and privacy, and it's uncharted territory and merits deep consideration. One of the things that I often recommend with intelligent tools is that you don't unleash an algorithm in your organization without a legal review. You want to understand what's going on. When we make decisions, particularly about the application of intelligent tools, the total cost of the decision that we're making needs to be an upfront piece of it. So it's common in times of crisis to make decisions that look cheap in the short run and are very expensive in the long run. And what we want to do going forward is make sure that our organizations are not encumbered by debt because we've kicked some decision making down the road. Same thing is true with maintenance. Quick decisions, quick installations, quick applications of intelligent tools create maintenance nightmares. And so maintenance is sort of a subset of the total cost argument. And what you want to do is keep an eye on maintenance, because maintenance is what allows you to have crisp output from your systems and get good decision making. Any intelligent tool needs to be able to deliver reproducible results, and this is a little bit of a challenge for these tools. And finally, you need a heavy, heavy, heavy layer of consideration about what the liability is in the decisions that we're making right now. Now, when I describe all of this, these are actually the necessary elements of problem solving in our contemporary environment. And so, for real, HR should be using ethics as a problem solving tool rather than a barrier to accomplishment. And so I've set these expectations. I hope you feel like I met them. I wanted to be sure that you walk away with the idea that machines have opinions, that there are tools that can help reduce the volume of calls, increase the consistency of answers, manage the flow of applicants, and you can install those things now while you're solving problems. But I also want to underline that this is a really important time to get your data in order. We just stepped through the idea that ethics is a way of solving problems. And in total, this view that I've been giving you should give you a framework for making decisions that allow you to land well with better data and more intelligent tools, reducing the overall manpower of your HR department. Thanks. Again, my name is John Sumser, and I'm the Principal Analyst at HRExaminer. You get in touch with me at john@hrexaminer.com or follow me on Twitter at John Sumser. Thank you very much. And just to leave you with a little something, here are the companies